Hello, it's Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint Rainy Day Bouquet with acrylics on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. Let's go over brushes and colors. So we'll be using 4 different brushes for this. We will be using a 3/4 inch flat wash brush. This is a Princeton Velvet Touch brush. This 12 bright brush is a Royal and Langnickel Majestic brush, and these next two are also Princeton Velvet Touch. So a number 8 round brush. I love this brush because it has that fine tip on it we can use for detail work, and the number 4 round brush. There are 9 colors in this, although you're welcome to use any brand, similar colors, or even take out some colors to simplify the palette. But we'll be using Liquitex Basics, Raw Sienna, Light Blue Permanent, Primary Red, Cad Yellow Deep, Primary Yellow, Hooker's Green Hue Permanent, Mars Black, Titanium White, and Prism Violet. That Prism Violet is especially a color you can substitute. You can use literally any purple color for that. We'll be hand drawing the umbrella with a white piece of chalk, and we'll also be needing a ruler to help draw the ground, the straight line in this painting. So let's go ahead and get started. We have a very simple background for this, and we're going to create this really pretty blue-gray color. So I have titanium white, light blue permanent, and Mars black on the paint palette. You do not need a lot of black for this, so just a little tiny dollop of black is all you'll need. You will need quite a bit of white and maybe a little bit less blue than white for this. And let's load our 3/4 flat brush in the water, kind of tap it dry, and let's make kind of our base color for this. So I'm going to grab a big chunk of white, a kind of a smaller chunk of blue, and just a teeny tiny bit of black. Mix it on your palette, but don't mix it all the way. You're gonna get this kind of swirled blue-gray color. Then on your canvas, use the full width of the brush to paint up and down paint strokes. You will get this blue-gray color. And the kind of trick for this background is to not blend colors all the way. So I am actually going to make it slightly darker on the left and the right, and slightly lighter in the middle. When you do backgrounds and you kind of make your background a little bit brighter in the center, that'll help bring contrast to whatever is in your painting. So this is actually going to make the umbrella kind of stand out a little bit better because it's brighter in the center, darker on the sides. So I'm just adding little bits of black to my brush on the sides of this and letting it blend, and I'm adding more white to my brush on purpose towards the center, although there's still black and still blue on my brush, so it's kind of a lighter bluish gray color in the center. And also try not to blend your colors all the way. So we're getting this rainy day effect, and it's very effective when you don't blend the colors all the way. It makes it look like the colors are just running and slightly blending together. So vertical paint strokes. Love the color that this creates with the light blue permanent. And I'm just going to kind of do the same thing over here on the left. Do blue and add a little bit more black to my brush as I approach the far left side of the canvas, and adding more splashes of white in the center so that it's a little bit lighter in the center. If you are finding it's kind of drying, you can add a little bit of water to your paintbrush. I am going to go silent here for a little bit while I finish up this step. If you need to press pause in the video, go ahead and do that, as the video does speed up slightly, and you can definitely take your time on this background. You might find that you want to add more blue or more white to your palette. So if you want a little bit more blue in the background, I'm going to do that. I'm going to add more light blue here kind of blend this with the gray. But again, we don't want to overblend the colors. In this next step, we will be doing the ground. So you'll need a straight edge. I'm going to be using a T-square ruler, and let's measure about 4 inches from the bottom of the canvas. So if you're working on a different size, you may have to kind of adjust that. You could also just estimate. So I'm going to actually make sure that everything is filled in, that there's no blank spots where I want to make this mark. I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to look for 4 inches and just take my brush and kind of make a dot where that's going to be and place my T-square down. I'm going to use it as a guideline for where this line is going to be. So we're going to be using the exact same colors, only we're going in a horizontal direction. So even if we painted those vertical marks below this line, that's okay. This is going to cover that up. And in fact, if some of that vertical if some of the vertical lines are still showing through, it kind of adds to the sort of wet reflection effect that we're trying to create here. So blue and white, I will use a little bit of black in there as well. Just don't want to do too much black. We don't want to get it dark. So I did the line first so that I can lift my ruler, and then I'm going to do the rest of this. So all the canvas is going to be filled up to the bottom with the blue, the white, little tiny bits of black. So I'm going to do a little bit of black kind of towards the bottom left corner area, bottom or the left edge of the canvas. I'm going to leave the center part mostly light in color, and that's mostly because we're going to be doing the umbrella and I don't want to have to do multiple coats of paint to cover up a dark area. So I'm going to try to leave that area as light as possible. I'm going to get some titanium white on my palette, and I'm going to wipe my brush off. It seems kind of overloaded with a lot of paint, so sometimes it helps to just wipe the brush off or even rinse it off and kind of start it over. I'm adding more white in the center area. Again, I want to leave that center area kind of bright for my umbrella. So let's let this dry before doing the next step, and the next step is drying the umbrella, which I am going to be using a piece of chalk for. And it's a relatively simple drawing, and I found it helpful to use the ruler for this. So let's start by kind of angling our ruler, and we don't have to get the exact length of this line perfect yet. We just need to have this line as this is like the pole of the umbrella, but it's also the center of the umbrella. So we draw a diagonal line from the top all diagonally down well into the ground area. So the length of that line is about 12 inches, but does not have to be exact. I did a little circle on the end of that line for the tip of the umbrella. And then we're going to do this half circle arc line, about 9-inch radius line. And I found that if you actually placed a paper plate, like use the circle of a 9-inch paper plate to help you with that line, you can. And then we want to draw the scalloped edging for the umbrella. So let's start with the center one to help us kind of center these out. Let's do a small arc line in the center, and then do 2 more on each side, and both of those should meet the ends of the umbrella. So we have 3 curved lines curving downwards. You get 4 points out of that. And then the back of the umbrella is a little bit tricky, and also keep in mind that this back part is actually going to be covered by flowers. So if you did this and it looks wonky, that's okay. It's going to be covered up later anyway. So that one, I did an extra bump. So we have 5 points and 4 bumps instead of the front part. And then in the front part, 2 curved lines that meet from both of those points, and that curved line meets that center part where it meets in that circle part. That's the top part of the umbrella. In this case, it's the bottom because the umbrella is upside down. So there is our umbrella. I'm going to kind of fix this line on the right. Then we can draw the handle of the umbrella. So this line curves. It's like we're drawing a candy cane almost. That curves for the center part, and then we can kind of sketch the handle that goes around that center part. So this is at the very top edge of the painting at this point. And then we can give this a little bit more thickness, although when we paint that in, we can actually just paint that line so it's thicker. So it's not just a thin straight line. So here's what I was talking about. If we use a paper plate, you could actually use this as your initial arc. I'm actually using this to kind of help me adjust this part right here. Chalk erases with water. You can use a wet paintbrush. Sometimes I'll use a soft baby wipe to erase the chalk. So see, that's helps us get that first arc in and the right size of it if we're using 11 by 14 inch canvas. So when we're done with the umbrella drawing part, we are going to load our palette with the color titanium white and primary yellow. So on your palette, use your 12 bright brush to mix both of those colors together equally, and you'll get a light yellow. So that white is essential for this because yellow is usually a transparent color, so we have the darker kind of background that we have to cover here to make our umbrella look nice and bright. So we have to do multiple coats for this, but using that white and yellow helps us get that coverage started there. So I'm actually going to paint this umbrella one little section at a time. We divided that up when we did the lines that divided each little kind of section. So I found it helpful to just outline the shape of the section first and then fill it in solid. So I'm having my paint strokes go curved this way, but actually I'm going to change the direction of those paint strokes in my second coat to go kind of horizontally curved. So let's do the second section. So we're going to outline this using the tip of the brush to outline. So that's yellow and white. There's my outline. And then I'm going to fill it in. So this one, I'm going to fill in. These are going to go this direction. Right now, it doesn't really matter the direction. You can curve it this way or you can curve it the opposite way. Because this is the first coat, this is going to be covered with a second and third coat of paint. So this is our first initial layer. I do like how it curves this way because it gives it more of a three-dimensional look on the umbrella. So with that white, and a little extra white right here, just because this part of the background is dark, I can see that background showing through, so I want coverage. I'm going to add more white there, so when that white dries, I'll be able to kind of go over that again with another coat of darker yellow, and then we'll really not be able to see that background below the umbrella. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. Use the tip of the brush to outline the shape of the umbrella first. So notice how I'm leaving like a little slither still kind of showing where the middle, the lines, the division lines are. So we don't want to lose those lines. And then I'm filling those in full width paint strokes in a curved direction that kind of gives it that three-dimensional look on the umbrella. So that is the first layer. If you still see background showing through or your horizontal line, that's okay because we'll be going over this again with a second and third coat of paint. I'm going to load a little bit more white on my brush. I'm going to actually add white to this one. And a little bit more white here. It shouldn't show up as pure white, just blending with that yellow So that helps with the coverage. And again, paint strokes going in this kind of curved direction to give it that three-dimensional look. Don't lose your lines that are dividing the umbrella up. So I'm going to let that dry, and while that's drying, I'm going to paint the back here. So this is the color Raw Sienna, and let's mix our yellow into it. So mix your primary yellow, and if it's okay, if it has a little bit of white on it too, that's fine. So Raw Sienna and primary yellow, and all of this back here is going to be this darker color. The Raw Sienna is only used to kind of darken our yellow. This is going to be covered mostly with flowers, although there might still be some of it kind of showing through in the end. We still want to cover this up so it's not showing any of the background still. So we have kind of a dark base for our flowers that are going to be in the bouquet and our umbrella, but still making sure your paint strokes are curving in the direction of that shape. We are going to let this dry before kind of doing anything else to it, but right now I'm going to do the handle of the umbrella, and we need a number 4 round brush for this. We need Mars Black and Titanium White. So on your palette, mix about equal parts black and white together. You're going to get a medium gray color out of that. I'm going to add, so your gray darkness might vary depending on your background. So if you have kind of a lighter area, you can go for a darker handle. But if your background ended up being kind of dark, you can go for a lighter color, if that makes sense, to give you contrast. Let's paint the tip part of the umbrella first. It's just a very simple little circle on the end part of the umbrella. And that one is mostly black. So right here we have our chalk line, but I'm still going to use this ruler and just be careful not to smudge any of the wet paint from the yellow. But I'm going to use that as a guideline to make sure my line is straight. And this line, I'm going to just initially kind of use my ruler to kind of guide my line, and then it needs to go over our dark yellow part inside of the umbrella as well. So that's that medium gray color, and I'm actually kind of pressing a little bit harder on my brush to make this line thicker, to give that handle more of thickness so it's not just a very thin line. You're going to go all the way to the curved kind of cane part of the handle, and then you can just fill that in. So this one I did mostly black, so pretty much solid black for that shape, and then when that dries we can highlight it. So just kind of take your time filling it in, short paint strokes to form this kind of candy cane shape. And then before this dries, I'm going to add just a little bit of white to my paintbrush so that it can be a little bit lighter over here on the left. It is blending a lot with the black, so it's not really working as a bright highlight. What I can do is after this dries, I can go and add another brighter highlight to the handle. And then I'm going to go back over the pole part with kind of layer of white on the left side, and that's kind of blending with the gray. So it's making the left side of the pole a little bit shiny, but also a little bit thicker. And again, if it's blending too much and if you want more of a highlight, you can wait for that to dry and then go back and add more white to it. So a lot of that bottom area is going to be covered by flowers, so it doesn't really have to be perfection. Next, we are going to go back over our yellow part of the umbrella with a darker yellow and also a second coat of paint. This is going to really brighten our umbrella up. So this is Cad Yellow Deep and the 12 bright brush all cleaned up. I'm going to kind of just start and go in the same kind of way that I painted it initially, but this is a dark layer. So I'm going to outline first. And you may find that this yellow is drastically darker. You don't like how darker it is. So what we can do, I'm actually going to go back, go these curved direction. And we don't need to be covering all of the first layer 100% either, but what we can do is we can grab more of our primary yellow and mix primary yellow with Cad Yellow Deep, and then it's not going to be too dark. So this actually is going to be more yellow kind of in the center, and we have kind of that darker yellow on the left outline part, which actually gives it a little bit of shadowing by doing it that way. So I'm going to do this again for this part. So outline with that dark yellow. So there's that line that we want to see still with that darker yellow. I'm going to drag that inwards this way. So it's darker on the left side. Grab my primary yellow so it's kind of lighter in the middle. You can even grab a little bit of white too and mix that with the primary yellow so it's definitely brighter, lighter in the center. And by going in these curved directions, it gives it that three-dimensional look. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this one. I'm going to outline using that dark yellow. Outline that line. Grab my yellow and do these curved parts, kind of dragging that darker yellow inwards. Grab my primary yellow and white, add that more towards the center, and then outline this far edge as well. And I kind of outline these ends, make sure they're nice and defined. I'll load a little bit more white on my brush. I'm just going to go back in and blend some white in the centers. So in the center part, I'm kind of dragging it in a curved direction. I can outline the edge a little bit. So now we have pretty good color variation and coverage. We can't see the background showing through. I am going to rinse my brush and I'm going to do a little bit of outlining, and this is going to really help to kind of define the umbrella a bit better. So I'm going to use the number 4 round brush with Mars Black. I'm going to add a little bit of water to the black and kind of loosen that. And then, so I'm going to kind of repaint that little circle piece on the end, and then I'm going to outline the lines on the umbrella, but very, very loosely with a very, very thin line. So this brush, I'm actually going to switch to my 8 round brush because this brush has that very, very thin point to it. You can even do this with a black paint pen, but you want to hold that brush very lightly. See how tiny that line is. We just need a very thin, subtle line. So I'm outlining those 2 lines in the umbrella. I'm going to outline this bottom line as well. And then I'm going to outline this line. This big curve, I'm not going to outline all of it. I just kind of stopped kind of halfway on the curve of the umbrella. These scalloped lines I'm going to outline very loosely, but again, not all the way. I kind of start and I just kind of let my brush loosely fade away. So that's not a continuous solid line. I'm going to add some shiny white highlights to the umbrella, kind of the last thing we're going to do before we start painting the flowers in this. So titanium white and the 12 bright brush. So there's just white on my brush, no yellow. And I'm going to take this and start right here. I'm going to do a highlight. So this guy, I'm using kind of the tip of it, but kind of twisting my brush a little bit so that I use more of the width of the bristles. So it starts out kind of thin, and then I kind of change the direction of the brush and press harder to make that kind of thick. So I'm doing this on the right side of each of the sections of the umbrella. The direction of that highlight is going in that direction of that black line that we outlined. So that gives our umbrella this kind of shiny look. If we want, we can even go in and do a few highlights that are going in that curved direction, but we don't need to go too crazy with it. On the ground, there's reflections of yellow from the umbrella. There's going to be some reflections of pink later, but right now let's do yellow and white. So it doesn't matter which yellow. You can use the primary yellow or the deep yellow. I like the deep yellow because it shows up better, especially when you mix it with the white. But it doesn't really matter. You can also just kind of mix the primary yellow in there as well. Just a few loose left and right paint strokes and do a little tiny bit of reflection with the black. So that's all we need for now. We can add more reflection later. Let's rinse our 12 bright brush and let's get our 8 round brush. If you're not using the 8 round brush, that's the brush that has a really fine point to it. Use another brush that has a fine tip to it, so your smallest round brush that you have. I'm going to take the titanium white and I'm actually going to add a little bit of highlight on the far right side of this pole with the white, and then I'm going to highlight the handle part again on the right side and a little bit over here on the left. Gives it that shiny look. I'm also going to use this brush to paint the raindrops. So all throughout your background, you are just loosely using just the tip of this brush. I'm barely letting the tip of the brush skid the surface of the canvas to make these raindrops very thin. They're all going vertical. There's a variety of lengths. Some are longer, some are shorter. And it's not super thick. It's very, very thin. So I'm going to do this all throughout the background. I can even do raindrops that are kind of overlapping the ground area and hitting the ground. We will be doing the flowers next, so you want to make sure that the inside of your umbrella and kind of the center area is all dry. Let's load our paint palette with the color Primary Red, and we'll be using the number 4 round brush. We're going to paint the roses first, and these are just going to be simple decorative style roses. And I do this type of rose in almost all of my paintings that have floral, and if there's a rose in it, I do this technique. So it's kind of a learned skill. If this is the first time doing it, I recommend kind of practicing it on maybe paper first to see, but once you kind of get it, it's really, really simple. So you're just going to take your primary red and kind of form a blob sort of rose shape with your primary red and your 4 round brush, and you can do this with any color. I'm just choosing primary red for this. And that's going to be our first layer for the rose. And I'm going to do several of these kind of all throughout. So don't worry about the stem for these roses. They're just going to be floating rose buds for now. And we'll do another one. So they're all kind of the same size, although you can make some smaller, some bigger. They're just solid one color at this point. Let's have one maybe overlapping the edge of the umbrella. So you kind of just paint a circle and then make the edges a little bit wobbly. So before these dry, and don't rinse your brush, load it into titanium white, so just white on the tip of the brush. Start in the center of the rose. I call these C strokes. They're basically just doing C strokes that are going outwards. So when you start in the center, you just keep doing C strokes, kind of going around and around, and then you kind of form outwards, kind of stagger the paint strokes, but you want to leave a lot of that dark pink layer showing through. Your white will be blending with your pink, and that's what we want. Start in the center, do these curved paint strokes that kind of stagger each other, and then they keep going outwards, forming the shape of those petals. And then on the outside, we can even add new petals that don't have that darker first layer there. So I'm going to do it again to this next rose. So you're just loading the tip of the brush in your white, start in the center, curve, curve, and each curve gets larger and forms your rose shape as you work outwards. It is picking up that pink and blending with the pink. You might find that by the time you get to your third or fourth rose, it's kind of blending too much, and that might be because your brush has overloaded with paint, so you may need to wipe the brush off at that point or rinse the brush or something to kind of get that to work so that it's not kind of all turning the same color at that point. So on the outer parts, it's like I'm kind of pressing down a little bit when I do these curved paint strokes. Or pressing light at first and then pressing kind of harder as I form the paint stroke and then releasing pressure. But that is a simple technique for painting decorative roses. If you want, you can do different colored roses in this bouquet. You're just kind of doing the same thing, just make rose heads that are just kind of floating inside the umbrella. And when we add the greenery to this, it'll all kind of make more sense. Let's do lavender. So this is Prism Violet. You don't have to use Prism Violet. You can use a different kind of purple. This just happens to be the purple I grabbed. So load your brush in purple and white. This is still the number 4 round brush. And I'm just going to paint these little dashed lines that are forming a column. And when I reload the brush, I'll grab different amounts of white and different amounts of purple. So the purple and white will blend together to create different variations of that. And you're just forming a column of purple. Same thing over here. These ones are going kind of outward, starting inside the umbrella. And so little by little, we'll be filling up this area with flowers of different kinds. So we can do another one over here. We can decide if maybe we want to overlap our roses, but I'm going to have this one kind of twist and go around the rose, so it's not overlapping too much. And then maybe there's one that's kind of hanging out the edge of the umbrella, so it's hanging down a little bit. So you get that color variation just by having our purple and white blend together on the canvas. We're going to do a different kind of flower. We're going to do simple little 4 or 5 petaled white flower. They're not daisies. Daisies would be maybe larger. These are just simple little white flowers. And so I'm just going to do white and do 5 petals. So just little rounded paint strokes. And I'm going to do several of these. Again, these are just flower heads that are just floating. There's no stem or leaf attached to them at this point, and it is okay that they're floating right now. We can have them kind of lower in the umbrella area, or we can have them higher. It's okay if we need to overlap some, and you can kind of vary that. So I did 2 white flowers on the left and 1 white flower on the right. You can decide if you want to add more or maybe add more later. And then the center of the flower, so we don't have to rinse the brush for this, but grab the Cad Yellow Deep, so the dark yellow, and I'm just doing little dots in the centers of each of the flowers. Let's paint a couple orange flowers next. So we can use our primary red and our dark yellow to make an orange color. So about equal parts primary red and the dark yellow. And this is going to make a dark orange color. So these are kind of poppy style flowers, bigger petals. We can do, I'm going to do 4 petals for this one. So these are just kind of like rectangular petals. And we can put these, and I'm going to put one on the left and one on the right of the umbrella handle. Again, you can decide to do more. So we're just keeping the flowers relatively simple because there's so many flowers. We can be very decorative and abstract about them. I'm going to take Mars Black and I'm going to do little dots of black in the centers of each of the orange flowers. I'm just going to take the black and little dots right in the center. And I surrounded that center part with kind of a ring of more dots. So these little dots are going around that center part. I'm going to rinse the black off my brush, and I'm going to do a little bit more color variation on these. So I'm going to go back with just the primary red, and I'm doing these little lines kind of on the base of each of the petals to give that a little bit more variation in color so it's not completely flat. Next, I'm going to do a yellow rose. So I'm going to take my yellow, my deep yellow, and maybe we'll put it up here. So same technique, only we're using different colors. So I'm going to start with the shape of the rose, which is like a circle, and it's got kind of the wobbly edge to it. Go back with my white, start in the center, and form the paint strokes going outwards. So now we have a bunch of flowers, but no leaves or stems. Let's do the color Hooker's Green Hue, and we'll use that color as the base for our green, but we can still mix white into it to make different variations. So let's start with an easy leaf. This one is going to be attached to this rose, and it's just hanging out on the side. So just a simple little kind of rounded leaf with the point attached to the side of the rose. You can grab a little bit of white on your brush and just kind of blend the white into it. I am not going to detail these leaves up with lines and veins or anything like that, but I do like to add a little bit of white or even yellow into some of the greens to give it some variation of color. So we want to do kind of a variety of different leaves. So maybe some of the leaves we can kind of do the technique that we did with the purple flowers. We can kind of stroke those leaf shapes upwards. And we want to fill in a lot of these gaps. So if there's a gap, we want to kind of go in there and do some kind of greenery with it. So this one's going to be hanging out the side of the umbrella. So I did a green line and then went back with white. I'm just kind of pressing my brush to create the little rounded leaves on each side of that line. And then we can do some more traditional shaped leaves just kind of to fill up some of the space. So maybe this one's kind of like an oval pointed shaped leaf. You can have another one that's kind of hanging out the side. So to alter your green color, you can add white into it. You can add yellow into it. So you can make your center line part of the leaf lighter or darker and then make the leaves. So this one I did like little oval pointed leaves on each side of that line. We can even have fun and make up some colors. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to add another little kind of rose leaf hanging out the edge right here and right there. So try mixing purple with your green. It'll make kind of this mauve color, especially if you still have white on the brush. So white, purple, and green gives you kind of a unique color you can work with. So I did that kind of line down the middle with the kind of the oval pointed shaped leaves. I'm going to work with that purple a little bit more. Maybe do more of a purple leaf. It looks really pretty when it overlaps that yellow because purple and yellow are contrasting colors, so it looks very nice together. So I'm going to do a few more of these purple mixed with green type of leaves. And you really just want to fill in gaps, so you shouldn't really have any floating flowers, or if you do, you can go back and fill them in with some more greenery. Just going to go back over my poppy flowers with another coat of that orange. Maybe I can take my white and kind of outline the edges of those poppy flowers. And that really kind of helps those petals to pop just a bit. Next, I'm going to add some reflection on the ground. So with any of the colors that we used in our floral, so the primary red or orange, you can even do a green reflection if you want. Just do little, this is still number 4 round brush, just little horizontal paint strokes on the ground. Gives that little pop of color down there. I am going to go back and fill my bouquet with more green. Just any of the gaps. We can have more leaves hanging out the side of the umbrella, different kinds of leaves. Add some more petal to this rose. And then I'm just going to go and fill in any little gap with just little tiny kind of curved paint strokes with the green. So this really helps to fill your bouquet up, makes it look very full because of all that extra greenery, little curved kind of expressive paint strokes in between all the gaps. And you can vary that color if you want to add maybe a little bit of white to it. So all the little gaps are filled up. Something that's kind of fun that we can do is add some color to the side of the umbrella, so I can rinse and can grab my pink or my primary red, mix white into it, and just a little bit. You don't want to kind of go crazy and alter the color, but just to make it look like that maybe some of the color from the flowers are reflecting on the umbrella. A little bit of purple over there on the left. And if it's too strong, you can always go back and just kind of soften it. So like the left part, I'm going to rinse my brush and use a dry brush to kind of smear that out a little bit so it's not super dark. Or a wet brush. It kind of gives it a watercolor effect with the wet brush. Loosens the paint. And then add some more yellow reflection over here on the bottom, kind of towards the left where there wasn't really reflection over there. I'm going to do one more detail to the roses, and this really adds some really pretty contrast and pop to our roses. So I'm going to take a clean brush and Mars Black, and in the centers of the rose, I'm just going to do little black dots. Just a few black dots in the center of each of the roses. Gives that a little bit more contrast. And that is the conclusion of how to paint Rainy Day Bouquet. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.